Rupture was, has anybody seen the picture of the rupture itself? We took that picture with a drone. It was, okay, where it took place, the terrain is where the hills of Mississippi meet the Mississippi Delta. And this pipeline ran down a hill right before it went to the Mississippi Delta. So you got really hilly terrain to a part of the country where you can watch your dog run away for 3 days. So it goes from here to here. So this took place on the side of a hill, and it was probably 100 foot below the roadbed where the actual rupture took place. And there was debris blown all the way up on top of that roadbed, covering it so you couldn't drive across it.
In his rebuttal testimony, Summit employee Rod Dillon, who was their expert on emergency response, was asked about whether access to electric vehicles would have been a benefit in the Satartia incident. And if we can go to his testimony, page 8, that would be the Dillon direct testimony. Rebuttal testimony, I'm sorry.
Objection, Your Honor.
So objection.
Again, this is not cross. In fact, the counties had the opportunity to file rebuttal to respond to Mr. Dillon's initial testimony. Could have, asked about any manner of things, and Mr. Whippel certainly, if it's within the scope, can ask on redirect. But Mr. Taylor asking questions to try and advance their side of the case through one of their side's witnesses is not cross-examination.
Mr. Taylor.
Well, I think as we discussed the first day, as Mr. Whippel said, there's really no such thing as friendly cross, with all due respect. It's a question of whether it's repetitive, redundant, irrelevant, and I'm just setting this up to ask a question about electric vehicles being used if they would have been beneficial.
We agree there's no such thing as friendly cross. The issue is the right to examine the witness is to cross-examine, and someone on the same side of the case is not cross-examining the witness.
Mr. Long, did you?
At the risk of what Mr. Blinsky just mentioned, I was going to follow up on something you said, Mr. Willingham.
Well, hold on. I thought you were weighing in on the objection.
Sorry, my mistake.
All right, Mr. Whippel.
I would like to weigh in on the objection, and I'd like to point out that there aren't only two sides in litigation this complex. There are some number of issues on which the counties and the Sierra Club have some agreement, and then many issues that they pursue for their members that the counties do not pursue and do not have interest in. And so, we haven't pursued the emergency management response together with the Sierra Club. I don't know what they're going to pursue on this issue. We're not exactly the same, is my point.
Can we rule?
I think it's perfectly proper for me to ask this gentleman who was actually in an actual situation whether he believes that electric vehicles would have been beneficial.
Okay. Mr. Taylor, continue with this question. Please refrain from friendly cross.
Based on your experience in the Satartia incident, would electric vehicles have been beneficial?
Most definitely.
Why?
We had a number of issues with the vehicles that we responded with of cutting out because of the lack of oxygen. Even the men that we saved off that road, we barely got them out on the particular UTV before it cutting out. We had ambulances, one that completely stalled out, numerous others that almost stalled out. We actually were at the point where our responders were stealing vehicles. that would run. We would find vehicles that would run, and we were using them as we were getting victims in and out of the city limits. So an electric UTV of some type would have been a tremendous asset, because you can't just walk in when you're over in rural areas with that much distance. Yeah. When you're carrying an SCB already, and you're already, at a time is a premium. Your air is a premium. So yes.
So would it be appropriate to train your emergency responders in regard to a CO2 release, just not to go in an area where you couldn't take your combustion vehicles?
No.
Why not?
You're going to have to get those people out one way or another. This incident took place starting at 7 o'clock at night and went until probably 10 o'clock the next morning. 14 to 16 hours after the incident, when our air monitors declared it safe for them to re-enter the town itself, we offered for everyone to have their homes checked for air monitoring before we let them back in. And the highest concentrations of CO2 found even at that time were inside the residences. If they had been sheltered in place, they still would have been at dangerous levels above what's supposed to be accepted. This was 14 hours afterwards. Their houses had to be aired out before they could go back in, even after the town was safe.
So what kind of levels did your air monitors show?
I can't remember the exact numbers. They were above the acceptable level at that time. If I told you the exact number, I'd be telling you a lie. We couldn't let the people back in their homes. They could be in the community. We couldn't let them back in their homes until they aired their homes out.
And how long did that take?
Another 2 hours.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Mr. Dubinsky.
Go right ahead. Your Honor, I want to put in a standing request that as the truly adverse party, that we get to do the last cross-examination of each witness on the other side of the case.
That's fine. But does anyone object?
I object.
Noted. Mr. Long?
I do not object, Your Honor, but perhaps some additional or maybe fewer objections to friendly cross if they're going to get the last cross every time.
Well, the alternative is that we go, a bunch of other people then put up their placards, go, and then we're going to want to go a second time, which is not remotely efficient. We certainly should not, friendly cross is bad enough, but if they then get to have friendly rehabilitation from the actual adverse parties questioning, that's just crazy off the rails.
It's crazy off the rails.
Crazy off the rails.
Thank you.
I learned that in law school.
All right. We all know the rules. We all know how we're supposed to proceed. I think we can all be respectful and easy to work with. We can avoid objections and unduly repetitious, unnecessary questioning. So, appreciate the objections, appreciate the notes. Mr. Long.
Thank you, Board Chair. Mr. Willingham, over here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your testimony. I want to follow up on the discussion you were having earlier when you were describing how you found some of the people in the emergency response to this incident. Do you know, were blood oxygen levels measured for the people you were responding to?
I'm sure they were by the EMTs and paramedics that were on scene. I can't tell you what the numbers were. No.
Do you know whether sort of a low oxygen state was found commonly with the people being responded to?
I'm sure it was, being as there was the amount of CO2 that was on there. That was the reason. But now I can't tell you for sure 100%. I can just tell you the symptoms they had.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I don't see any placards up. Mr. Jorde?
Yeah, I guess we didn't get a ruling on Mr. Blinsky's request, but I'll go ahead and go first. Sir, a couple things that you mentioned caught my attention. Shelter, you mentioned the concept of shelter in place, have you become aware that that's currently the recommendation by Summit?
That's correct. I read that in their testimony.
Okay. And again, based on your personal experience, I take it your opinion is shelter in place would have done much more harm than good.
Okay. In a perfect world where everybody lived in perfect structures and were properly trained on what shelter in place really means, it means having a sealed, airtight room to where the outside elements can't get into you, shelter in place would be perfect. Where these pipelines are going and where it was in my community, most of the homes are old, 100-year-old homes. They're completely not sealed from the outside. They're not structures that would supplement somebody's sheltering in place. And if you're not going to go within these communities and embed yourselves in there and explain to these residents what it means to shelter in place and what you have to do to get your house ready for it, that is definitely not a viable option.
The other thing caught my attention. You said 1.7 miles. Was that the kind of outer limits of where you personally encountered people that had suffered symptoms related to this release?
That's correct. And the only reason it was limited to 1.7 miles is that was the last resident downrange of where the plume was going that we had to get to. The rest were well further away. But the plume went further than 1.7 miles.
Okay, so you're not making an opinion that was in fact the outer limit, but that was your personal
That was our
experience.
personal, yes.
Got it. Okay. And did you have to take any persons to the hospitals, or had they already been transported there?
We transported. No, I personally did not. I had ambulances. We had our ambulances from Yazoo County and our neighboring county, Warren County, sent ambulances, and there were 45 people transported to the hospital that particular night to Yazoo City and Vicksburg.
All right. Could I trouble staff to pull up landowner 584, please? 584. And in the meantime, sir, you stated that you had taken a drone overview picture of the Rupture site. Do you know if that was the photo that made its way into the PHMSA failure investigation report, or?
Yeah, that photo should be in there. It should be an overview picture. It looks like a bunch of ice on the ground,
right,
with a big pipe rupture. Okay. That's correct.
All right. And again, you're with is it called Yazoo?
Yazoo County.
Yazoo County.
Come on, no but
yeah.
Yazoo.
Well, I'm learning.
It's Mississippi.
Okay. All right. I just want to direct your attention to page 1 of LO 584. Now, you may or may not be aware, but we did a public records request to your county, and this was produced in response. Do you know what this is?
I sure do. That was in October of that particular year. There was another incident where Denbury was going to do some maintenance on the pipeline there, the CO2 pipeline. And during their maintenance, they opened a manual valve to bleed off some of the product, during which the manual valve froze open and they were unable to close it. And it bled off product for approximately 24 hours.
Okay, so is this actually
CO2?
Okay, being released from the same Denbury pipeline?
It's that particular line. That's a smaller version of the same line. The rupture took place on a 24-inch line. Okay. That's coming out of about an 8-inch part of the line, right there.
Okay. And did you say this was a planned release, or this was unplanned?
So they initially went into it, from what I understand, is when they finally called me about it, they had planned on just like clearing an area so they could do maintenance on the line. So they were going to bleed the valve down just that one line. In doing so, their valve froze open, which required them to bleed product out of another 14-mile section that took approximately 24 hours. That's a daytime version of it where it's going up in the air like it should. If you would have been there during the night, you could see where it was actually flattening out on the ground, and we had to close that highway down that whole period of time.
Well, if you could go to the second page, let's see what that one.
There you go.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you're describing this as being closer to the ground, or?
That's correct. That's where it's cooler outside. Cloud cover was a little higher. There was a possibility of rain. Instead of the product dispersing straight into the air, you see it's coming down coming across the highway and spreading out on the ground.
Okay. And is that more consistent with what occurred based on your personal experience on the...
In a minuscule scale.
Okay.
But yes, that's more consistent with what happened there.
Okay.
But nowhere near the scale.
Right. But the concept of being lower to the ground where people are.
Right. Where it's going in, as you'll see, it's finding these ditches, finding the low spots, and following through them.
All right.
And this is, and again, as I was describing the topography, I can't say it right now. This side over here is your hills. Over here is your flatland.
Now, just again for the record, since this is all being typed down, could you just use left and right in terms of page 2?
The left side is where your hills, which the actual break took place well up that hill. And the right side is where the delta is, where the Mississippi Delta starts.
And we've heard testimony that CO2 is heavier than air, such that it sinks. Did you observe that based on the terrain, that it found its way to lower levels?
It went from high to low. That is correct. It looked for low ground.
Okay. And are you familiar with these photos?
I took them.
Oh, you took these photos?
Yeah.
Personally?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, then I would offer exhibit 584.
Are there objections?
No objection.
Seeing no objection, the board will admit Jorde landowner hearing exhibit 584.
And I guess there's a third page. Can we just, I forget, what's that?
That was where they were actually making the repair, the weld on that 8-inch line.
Okay, that's an 8-inch line. That's not the 24.
That's not the 24.
8-inch line. Okay, thank you. So then lastly, picking up on that valve, have you had the opportunity to understand that part of Summit's proposed plan is that it will have automatic or computerized detection shutoffs? Have you had any experience, I take it, with those not working properly?
We had that in Yazoo County when this incident took place. Their procedure, apparently that particular night, they got an alert that they had a problem, and they had contacted their pipeline operator who lived 40 to 45 miles away, and were sending him to the scene. By the time he got there, we had determined what was going on by contacting them. Once we found out what was happening 45 minutes after it first started, we contacted Denbury. That's when they told us they had a drop in pressure. That line bled off from a 9.5-mile area for approximately 4.5 to 5 hours, sounded like a jet engine going off. I was told later, I don't know, it never was in the report or anything, that maybe the valve did not properly shut off when they first tried to shut it off. I can't tell you if that's true or not.
Okay, and then on the example that we just looked at that was months after...
That was a manual valve.
Okay, so one that couldn't be closed.
That's correct.
I see. As a first responder, I mean, kind of lessons learned, would it have been helpful for you on the front end to have known the best estimate of the worst case parameters of dispersion so that you would have known what perimeter to secure or how better to respond to this?
Of course it would have. Of course it would have been great for them to let us know there was an incident. But yeah, it would have been great to know your worst case scenario where I needed to start looking. I was very fortunate that we had first responders that were familiar with the area and went out and did what we had to do.
And I've never been to the area, but did you have to rely on other neighboring communities to send their persons in to assist?
Yes, Yazoo County is a small rural county of about 34,000 people, even though it's 1,000 square miles. And we have limited resources. Fortunately, we train with neighboring counties, so we work together often, and we have a good relationship.
Summit witnesses have stated that, I mean, essentially, don't worry, we're going to train people, and I think they may have said annual training. Have you been a part of any type of annual pipeline training?
Paragon?
I don't know.
I think that's the name they're talking about. Yeah, we have it once a year. Paragon is an organization that gets all of your pipeline operators together. So once a year in our county, and they have it, I think, in just about every county in Mississippi, once a year they're going to have every pipeline operator in your county. Previous to this incident, Denbury didn't participate. They do now. But what they do is they'll set up a little booth like at the fair where they'll say, I'm Denbury, I operate a 24-inch line that carries pressure at this. I'm your pipeline operator. And they give away free stuff to you, and they tell you who your operator is. And you go to the next one, and you just go, this is Kinder Morgan. We operate a 24-inch pipeline. This is Atmos Gas. We operate a 36-inch pipeline. And then they're going to serve you a bunch of good catfish, really good stuff. And the guy's going to stand up there and have a generic program, which he gives pretty much every year, that says, this is a pipeline placard. This is what you do when you see one. This is how you call it in. Just a generic episode, not particularly to any particular type of pipeline. It's very generic. And it's pretty much the same program every year.
So,
but now it's helpful. It lets you contact who it lets you know who your contacts are.
okay.
And it gets you in touch. But it's generally for first responders and operators. But I've never seen the general public in them.
But from what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have a quote unquote training. Apparently, they tell you some basic information of who to call if you have a problem. But is it fair to say they're not giving you a lot of like best practices or how-to type of material?
It's not direct to CO2 now. They may have some like leaflets out there, generic. Again, it's like a fair booth. When you go to the county fair, the booth you see there, it's got general information. You meet your guy. It's that type of thing.
Okay. All right, sir. Well, let me ask you one more thing. Did you, in part of your emergency response, have you become familiar with any of the 911 or emergent calls for help that occurred that day?
Yeah, I'm also the 911 director in Yazoo County.
Okay. Just, this will be my last area of inquiry, but just describe generally the type of calls that were coming in.
Well, our center was flooded, of course, and it was with people that were in panic. They really weren't sure what was going on. People whose vehicles were stopped, shut down. People were having medical problems, shortness of breath, disoriented, didn't know what to do in the situation. They were scared from the roaring sound and the smoke and gas in the air. People that couldn't breathe, wanting help, wanting to know what to do.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Mr. Jablonski.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Willingham.
Yes,
All the lawyers squabbled a bit there. I had the opportunity to talk a little bit to Mr. Briggs up in North Dakota, and your name came up, and we looked at some things that you had said along the way. Am I correct that prior to the Denbury Pipeline incident, that some of the response officials in those local communities did not know that there was a CO2 pipeline in their vicinity?
That is correct. And the 3 counties surrounding it did not.
And so and that's why for the initial part of the incident response, you thought it might be a chlorine leak.
That's correct. I mean, we had a response. You hear a smell of rotten gas, and what you saw, that's just what you narrowed it down to.
Just curious, you were talking with Mr. Jorde about the photos that you took and the difference that appeared in those photos in the plume shape. Do you have any corresponding metered readings of the concentrations in any points from those 2 plumes?
Those 2 that particular night?
Yeah.
I don't think there was any air monitoring going on because it was more of a smaller release right there, and it stayed right in that general vicinity.
Okay. You were talking about UTVs, I believe, with Mr. Taylor. The evening of the Denbury incident, you did not have any electric UTVs.
And that is correct. We had gas.
Okay. And you've talked a little bit about the symptoms of some of the folks that you encountered. Have you provided or put in evidence any medical records for any of those folks?
I have not.
Are you aware that Iowa has about 40,000 miles of liquids and natural gas pipelines in the state?
I do not know the direct number. I know there's probably like Mississippi, there's a lot.
Do you know if any of the existing operators of those lines have shared dispersion modeling with anybody?
I have no idea what the people in Iowa have shared.
Okay,
No, sir.
so you also don't know if any of those operators have engaged in outreach that would comply with what you describe in your testimony?
I do not.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
I had 2 quick questions, Mr. Williams.
Yes, sir.
for the on page 14, line 5, you describe a Buxus system. Am I saying it correctly?
That's correct.
All right. And for the record and clarity, would you describe what a Buxus system is and how it works?
Buxus is it's right now in, what is the word I'm looking for? A beta operation. And what it is, it's a system that to where I will get the pipeline information directly to me. I won't have to wait for the operator. When they get a alert, it comes to me and to my responders, and I can monitor it. But part of the requirement of Buxus is the pipeline operator has to opt into it. There's 2 currently in my county that's opted into it. One of them would be Denbury, which is now Exxon, and Kinder Morgan. But I get their information direct to me, mapping everything they get, I get.
Do you know what agency in Mississippi permitted the Denbury pipeline?
I do not. It's been there for a while. Apparently, before I even took over as an EMA director.
Okay.
They use it to get oil out of the ground. They use CO2 carbon to get oil out of the ground.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Willingham. I got some questions just based off of some things that you've said that I just want to know a little bit more detail on. So one of the first things you stated is you said that by the time you guys got to Satartia, everybody had been moved out.
By the time I got there,
correct.
My responders did it. When you have an incident like this, I was leading it from the emergency operations center. So I'm in one spot with my kind of leaders. But by the time I got on scene, everybody had moved out. Yes, that's correct. There was nobody there other than air monitors and first responders.
I've never been to Mississippi. I've never been to Satartia. How big of a community are we talking? Like, how many people needed to be moved out?
We moved out 200 people, but the actual, hold on now, get ready for this. City limits of Satartia, there's 56 residents.
Okay. I come from rural Iowa, so I understand.
Yeah.
So one of the things, so in a prior lifetime, I had to work with natural gas. One of the things we always did is annually we worked with first responders.
Did a gas burn?
Well, we actually did a safety meeting, went through everything as a couple-hour type of thing, but we worked specifically with them. So am I hearing you say that the version of that was taking place was at the fair? So was there ever
No, I said, what they were describing, the Paragon particular meeting that they have once a year, is not the same as where you have a natural gas burn where we go out there and we go over the training and actually do a burn.
Okay.
I'm saying that the Paragon is not like a actual full-scale drill. At best, it would be a tabletop generic drill. And if you've ever done a tabletop and know the difference between a full-scale and a tabletop, that's what it would be. I'm saying that your different pipeline operators from your county and all of them, and I'm not saying it's not helpful, it's very helpful. They're going to set up booths for your first responders to go around and meet them and talk to them. They're going to have little pamphlets, and they're going to have just a generic, hey, this is what we look for in pipeline incidents. Not particularly CO2, not particularly natural gas, not particularly gas, not particularly oil. Just generic pipeline type stuff. The placard you look for, the things you look for, who to contact.
And then, just out of curiosity, you said that this pipeline was in place before you took your current position.
That's correct.
So when you took your current position, did you know, A, about this pipeline being there, and B, did you know what product it was carrying?
I had no idea about the CO2 pipeline. No, I knew about the rest of the pipelines in the county. But again, Denbury didn't participate even in the Paragon thing to begin with. We invited them all the time to our full scale, to our LEPC meetings, all the community engagement meetings, and they were just not a part of it. So we just were unaware. I mean, I was aware that they pumped CO2 into the ground to get oil out. I guess by logic I should have known, but no, we did not know of a carbon pipeline coming through our county.
And so you kind of went into my second question there. I think I heard you say earlier that they did not participate, but then after the incident, now they've started participating.
They are tremendous participants. They help us with after the incident, anything we need. They're the ones that helped us get hooked up with this. We're trying to get a grant from PHMSA right now that'll help pay for this beta program for Buxus. I think we are the test county on it, for the country at this particular time. They help us for community outreach. They help us. They want to be a part of everything that goes on. actually purchased a mass alert system for the county. We have air monitors for our fire departments in that area, the best quality air monitors. They got a guy that pretty much comes down and takes care of Jack. I mean, I don't mean it in a bad way, but he's involved. He's really tremendous at his job.
So just to put a time frame, just to clarify for me, so there was a valve incident, and we also had the major incident of the leak on the hillside.
Right.
Which happened first?
The big incident took place first.
And then after that, there was
the big incident took place in February. The valve took place in October. And they started really participating about a year and a half later, 2 years later.
And one last thing I want to dig into just a little bit. You talked about a little bit about the shelter in place and the home structures. And you said something to the effect that they're 100-year-old homes, and in your opinion, you said that they're not, or there's not a airtight. How did you describe that?
It's not my opinion. When we went into those homes afterwards and took readings, they're way in excess of what you're supposed to be breathing in CO2 inside of them.
I think you made mention of something that they don't have homes that have an airtight room or something.
That's correct. To shelter in place, to truly shelter in place in a chemical incident, you need to cut off all your ventilation. You need to be able to cut off your inside air. You need to be able to do everything. You don't want anything getting in there, or else it's still going to come in. If you have a tight house and your air is still on, you're still going to take in stuff from the outside.
So out of curiosity, just, again, never been to Mississippi, the home structure itself in Mississippi, I'm assuming your average temperature is a lot warmer than ours.
It is.
Do homes typically in Mississippi also insulate in between in the rafters, in between?
Yeah, we use insulation, like everybody here.
All right, thank you.
Got inside plumbing, too.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was good. I think that is all the questions or clarifications I had. Thank you, sir.
And Mr. Willingham, just a couple clarifications as well. So the Buxus system, you said you've got a couple pipelines in your area that are participating.
So far.
What parameters are you actually able to see? Is it alarms?
Supposedly when it's complete, I'll be able to see everything. Supposedly when it's complete, I'll be able to see everything that they can see. Again, it's all in beta process right now. But I can pull up the pipelines in Iowa right now on my phone.
Are you so would you be able to see they're getting an alarm?
That's correct. If they have a drop in pressure, the way this is supposed to work when it comes through is I'll be able to see when they get a drop in pressure. So I'll know that there's a possible incident going on.
And then which
will cut out them having to call the PSAP, which is the public safety answering point, if they're going to do that, or avoid them sending their guy down to it.
And you'd rather cut that middle piece
Anytime
out.
you can cut that middle piece out, it's going to be helpful.
And would the system also allow you to pinpoint the location as much as they would be able to?
From what they're telling us, it's supposed to be able to allow us to pinpoint the location.
Okay.
And not only will it come to me, it'll come to whatever responders that I need within my county, if it works correctly. Again, it's still in testing.
So you also said that Denbury is participating a lot more now.
A lot more. Yeah, they're tremendous right now. It's the best part I got.
Do you feel properly prepared for future incidents now?
Well, I feel like that probably being the person that's worked the only major incident in the country, as everybody says, I'm as prepared as anybody. And we train a lot better. We've actually put together a class for our first responders, telling them what to expect, how to respond, and we drill on it. We test on it. Denbury themselves have started putting on, once a year, they'll put on a tabletop for CO2. We have our own in-house training related to the CO2 program. So we're much better prepared than we were before.
And is there anything additional you would recommend that would make you even more prepared?
I just think that if it's going to work, you're going to have transparency between your operator and your responders. This hiding stuff for security or whatever, you're going to have to eliminate that. You're going to have to get them to be prepared. If you can't trust your responders, who can you trust? I mean, you can't say, I can't give them a plume because Satartia is going to take it over in Satartia, Mississippi. The people in Satartia, Mississippi deserve to know what's going to happen. The responders going there need to know what's going to happen, and that's who we need to think of. And not just on the plume clouds, on everything that's going on. Stop telling people it's not dangerous. It is dangerous. Now, is there a chance it's not going to? Is the chances low of something happening? Sure, the chances are low of something happening. But if it does, let's have everybody prepared and let them know what's going on. Build a relationship, embed yourself in the community, and stop BSing each other. That's the only way it's going to work.
Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Whippel.
Just one or two redirects, Your Honor. Mr. Willingham, when you say Buxus, is that the commercial developer or the name of the app?
That's the name of the app.
Would you be able, for the record, to identify the commercial developer or government product that you're referring to so we can identify it better?
I would have to look back in my emails to see what the lady's name is, the company that runs it, that's developing it.
Okay, if you don't know, that's fine.
But I don't know it off the top of my head, no.
But Buxus is the name of the application.
Buxus is the name of the application.
And it's a private software developer.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Willingham. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay. You may step down. Thank you. Appreciate it. That should conclude the county's witnesses. Mr. Meyer, I believe you're next.
Hardin County calls Lee Galantine.